Hello, my name is Hüzeyfe. I'm a student at the University of Istanbul in Turkey, and I study the history of religions. I am from Austria. I came to Turkey in order to study in the Faculty of Theology, and after my graduation, I entered this new world, a world of many religions. It was very complicated for me at first, but I want to explain to you how the historical progress occurred in Turkey. Now, this is for students who live outside Turkey and who want to study the history of religions in the Turkish universities. Now, I want to summarize an article written by Professor Shinasi Gündüz, who is also my professor in my university, and we will look at the historical progresses. So let's begin. Now let's talk first about the religions of Anatolia. Now Anatolia was called Asia Minor. It's called Little Asia, and it has a unique characteristic in the world. Now many religions were living in the Anatolian region. Now we have Roman paganism, the Greek paganism, and of course religions which were influenced by Mesopotamia, like the Haranians. And then after that, after paganism, monotheist religions entered this area, and the most important of them was Christianity. And then we have the Jewish diaspora. The Jews, after the destruction of the Second Temple, they entered Anatolian region. Now they settled in Antioch, in Ephes, and in Tarsus. And then in the Middle Ages, now we have the state Al-Andalus in Spain, an Islamic country actually. And then the Muslims were expelled from there, and the Jews as well. And the Jews were forced to convert into Christianity. Jews wrote a letter to the Ottoman Sultan and asked for permission to enter the Ottoman region, and then the Ottoman Sultan replied and called them to settle in the western shores of Anatolia, in today's Turkey, for example Smyrna, Bursa, and Constantinople, Istanbul. And they came, and the Jews came, and today Jews still live in those places. We have the Rabbinics and the Karaims. There are several important Christian centers located in Anatolia, like Antioch, Istanbul, Ephesus, and Tarsus. The names of these places are actually mentioned in the Bible as well. Now, St. Paul, who was born in Tarsus, began his missionary across Little Asia. From there, he went to the Balkans and then to Rome, where he was executed. The first Christian city was Edessa, and his king, King Abgar, converted to Christianity. He was the first king who converted to Christianity, and he told his people to convert into Christianity as well. And the people followed, and the city-state was completely converted into Christianity. And this, Edessa, this is a state in the current state, Turkey. This is a very important development in the history of Christianity, and of course in the history of Anatolia. And when did Islam enter Anatolia? Now, today's Turkey is an Islamic country. Before, it was a Byzantine empire. It was Christian, and then the Muslims conquered the Byzantine empire and Islamized the region. Now on the 10th AD onward, Turks tried to enter Anatolia through battles. And in the battle in 1071 AD, Sultan Alparslan, the Sultan of the Seljuks, defeated the Byzantine king and let all his army enter Anatolia. He told his generals before his death, go into Anatolia, take what you can take with battle, and settle there. And then many Turkish tribes actually settled in the Anatolian region, and they brought their religions and traditions with them. Okay, now to the history of religions in Turkey. Well, actually, it didn't develop enough in Turkish academies, and there are several reasons for that. And the first one is the Turkish educational system. Now, the Turkish educational system is very different from where I came from. I came from Austria. It was very disciplined, but in Turkey, I couldn't see any discipline. I hope it will develop in later periods. Okay, the Turkish educational system, it's programmed by the state. The state controls the educational system. Now, and then we have the traditional Muslims. Many Muslims actually don't understand why a Muslim should examine other religions. Now, they say Islam is the only way to God, and God sent the Quran to follow in order to enter paradise. So why should we research other religions? They neglected that. They didn't want other Muslims to research other religions, so they opposed it. And then there's another reason. The Western countries, they had researched other religions very early, but the Muslims, in the late 19th century, there was a new period of researchers about other religions. But before that, they weren't interested in other religions. We will look at this reality later on. Now, our aim in this presentation is to make a description of the historical progress, like I talked before. Now, we can examine this progress in 4 phases. Now we have the traditional phase, then the apologetic phase, and nationalist, and then last the phenomenological phase. We will look at all of this right now. Now to the historical roots. Converts brought their culture into Islam. Now there were many Zoroastrians, the Iranians, the Persians actually. They converted to Islam after the conquest of the Muslims. And Jews and Christians, they converted into Islam as well. Well, when you convert into another religion, you bring your thought and your background with you, your culture. You cannot just detach the culture from you. You bring them with you. And they brought a lot of things from Christianity, from Judaism, and from the other religions. And the Quran is a 600 pages long book, and 2/3 of the Quran talks about the history of the prophets. The history of the prophets include Judaism, Christianity, and other religions. So people wondered, what is the core beliefs of Judaism? And they opened the Bible for the first time. This is a very important development. Now the first research was made in the Quranic commentaries. There are a lot of Quranic commentaries, and people inverted Christian commentaries and Christian elements into these commentaries. Now we find Jewish and Christian elements in these Quranic commentaries. There were also historical works done, which include Indian religion, for example, Christian religion, and so on. And the Muslim writers, the early Muslim writers, wrote about other religions. I wrote the most important of them. Now, Ibn al-Kalbi, he wrote a book called Kitab al-Asnam, in which he examines the Arab paganism during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. It's a very important book. And then we have Muhammad ibn al-Huzayl. He wrote Kitab al-Majus. The word Majus actually means Zoroastrianism. So he wrote about Zoroastrians. And al-Biruni, he is a very important researcher in the early period. He wrote Tahqiq Mal al-Hind. Well, like the word Hind indicates, it's about Indian sectarian movements. And Asar al-Baqi an al-Qurun al-Haliya, it's about various religious movements and sects. Now to the early Islamic writings. Now, the early writers, actually wanted to defend Islam against other religions. Why? Because they conquered the lands of foreign religions. They conquered the territories of Christians, and Christians still live there. And they say Christianity is the only way, is the rightful way to God. And the Muslims and the Christians debated together, and then the Muslims began to write against other religions. The most important of them is Ibn Taymiyyah. He wrote Al-Jawab As-Sahih Liman Battala Din Al-Masih. It's against Christianity. He says that Christianity cannot be proved to be a religion from God. Now we have two different types of literatures. The first one is Milal and Nihal, and the second one is Qisas Anbiya. Now Milal, this means the rightful path, the religions who follow the right path of God, and Nihal actually means the wrongful religions. Now these lectures, these literatures are the main resources for our studies today in Turkey. It's about cultural, philosophical and religious traditions. And Qisas Anbiya, now let's look at the words. Qisas means stories, and Anbiya means the prophets, the stories of the prophets. Now, the first prophet, according to Islam, is the first man, Adam. Now, if you say the stories of the prophets, you have to begin from the beginning of the humankind. So you start from Adam, and then go to in where you live. If a writer wrote it in the time of the Umayyad period, he began from Adam to the Umayyad period. Now the aims of these literatures are to describe other religions, of course, and then to defend Islam. So we can compare this to the early Christian writings, apologetical writings against the heretics, right? So the Muslims did that as well. And the Milal and Nihal writings, there were several writings, and I will mention a lot of them right now with their books. For example, Abu Bakr al-Baqillani, he wrote Al-Milal wal-Nihal. Abdul Qahir al-Baghdadi wrote Al-Farq bayn al-Firaq. Ibn Hazm, Kitab al-Fasl fil Milal wal-Ahwai wal-Nihal. Now you can see there is a lot of Milal and Nihal. You can see that. Abu Muzaffar al-Asfarani, he wrote Al-Milal wal-Nihal. And Ash-Shahristani, this is the most important of them. He wrote Kitab al-Milal wal-Nihal. Now Eric Sharp, the researcher, he wrote that the book of Ash-Shahristani can be considered the first history of religion literature. Now this is very important, the earliest writings, right? Now to the Qisas Anbiya writings, like I mentioned before, it includes the creation of the first man, the history of the prophets, and the historical struggle between the truth and the wrongful. And the Qisas Anbiya writings include also Christian and Jewish commentaries. For example, the Bible is very frequently used in these writings. And its aim is to defend the truth and refute wrongfulness, like always. Now, here are some examples. Ibn Qutayba wrote Al-Ma'arif, Al-Tabari wrote Tarikh, Al-Maqdisi, Al-Bad wa Tarikh, and Ahmed Jawdet Pasha, a very late researcher in the Ottoman Empire, he wrote Qisas Anbiya wa Tawarikh Khulafa. And the important part in his writings is that he included the Ottoman history into the history of Islam as well. And now to the last period of the Ottoman Empire. Now everything will change here. Please focus on this lecture. Ottomans were not interested in other religions at first. Why? Because all other religions and the people who belonged to other religions were subjected. Now the Ottomans, they fought a lot of battles and they always won. And because they are so strong, they didn't have any interest in other religions because Islam was always victorious. Why should they look into other religions? Other religions should look at them at first, right? They thought like that. But in the late 19th century, everything began to change. The Muslims began to lose. and colonialism began to occupy many Islamic countries, right? So people began to ask themselves, what do eigentlich, I'm sorry, this was a German, what do actually Christians believe? Because Europeans conquer Islamic lands and they are the rulers, so they also bring with them missionaries, right? And so there were a new debate to be made. The first institutions in the Ottoman Empire were the madrasa. This is a scholars' school system. It taught about the history of religions, and we have Darul Funun, Faculty of Arts. It taught about the history of religions as well. Now, in the second Meşrutiyet, the Meşrutiyet is a turning point in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, the Sultan, actually began to westernize. He tries to make the Ottoman Empire modern, like the Europeans and like America. And they began to teach the history of religions with the name Tarikh-i Adyan. Tarikh means history, Adyan means religions. And where did they teach? There were several systems in that time. For example, Madrasatul Irshad, the Süleymaniye, and Madrasatul Vaizin. In the Süleymaniye, besides the history of religions, it was also taught history of the religion of the Turks. Now, why did they study it? There are two reasons. The first one, I mentioned that before, westernization, and the second is missionary. Now, Christians from Europe came into the Middle East. They proclaimed Christianity is the right path, is the right religion. Come to Christianity. Now they wanted to defend themselves, right? So they tried to find wrong things in the Bible. They opened the Bible and began their research. And now to the Ottoman writings. The first Turkish book in the history of religions is the book Esatir, written in 1878 by Şemseddin Sami. And he used Western sources for his studies. This is the beginning. Now the books with the title Tarikh-i Adyan, Ahmet Mithat, he had an Islamic approach like the earlier writers. He actually taught that Islam is the right way and the other religions are the way to hell. And Mahmud Esad and Esad Bey, and then at last Mehmet Şemseddin, and he had a big Western approach. He wanted to research like the Western Europeans do. Now there were two different understandings. The first is Islamization under Ottoman identity. Now we have to wonder, there are a lot of people living in the Ottoman Empire. The Jews, Christians, Muslims, and other people as well. Now the Ottoman Empire was an Islamic state. It wanted to unite all of the people under Islam. So this is why they try to Islamize the country. The second is Westernization influenced by positivism. Now it's very interesting. On the one hand, they want to Islamize the country. On the other hand, they want to Westernize. Now it actually didn't work. We will see this later. Now to the modern Turkish Republic. History of religions changed because of state policies and educational reform. Now the modern Turkish Republic isn't an Islamic state anymore. It's a secular state and it doesn't want to defend Islam anymore. So the state policies include Westernization and the most important, nationalism. The Turkish version of Islam began to occur in Turkey. For example, the Quran is translated into Turkish. The adhan, this is called the call to prayer. It's done in Turkish and not in Arabic. And the sermon, hutbah, the Friday sermon, it was also done in Turkish. And then Atatürk, the founder of the modern Turkish Republic, he founded the Institute of Religious Affairs to control the religion inside the state. Okay, and now because of the westernization, people began to abandon their dogmas, Islamic dogmas, and then they began to research non-Islamic religions. Now to the important researchers from 1950 to 1990. Now we have Hilmi Omar Buddha, and now you see his surname is actually Buddha. This is because the founder of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, told him to examine, to research Buddhism. And after that, people told him Buddha. And then he actually took that name. Hilmi Omar Buddha. He was from the University of Ankara. He was the head of the Department of the History of Religions from 1949 towards 1952. He was the first scholar to use phenomenological method. He researched Indian and Chinese religions. And then after his death, Annemarie Schimmel, she was a German scholar, and from 1954 he was the head of the department. He wrote a book called Textbook of the History of Religions. And then we have Hikmet Tanyu. With him, a new period of nationalism began, and a new apologetic approach rose in Turkey. He had many followers, he had many students, and he was very nationalist. Now, for example, he thought Zoroaster could be a Turk. And then he said that the scholars should only focus on the topics which were related to the Turks. Okay, studies until 1990. Let's look at that. First-hand sources were neglected. Why? Because the people couldn't read Greek or Latin. They had only Turkish in their hands. And they stayed away from international scholarly activities, and they focused on their research on religious minorities in Turkey, on encyclopedic information, a little information about religions, not very important. They tried to defend Islam, and they tried to compare the Quran to the Bible. And they also examined groups with evil intentions like Sabbatists and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And the reasons for decline is they had all background in Islamic theology. They didn't know anthropology, they didn't know linguistics, or philosophy and so on. They just looked at with the Islamic perspective, and they wanted to make a service to Muslim majority. Now the Muslim majority, they had questions in their mind and they tried to answer them. This was not very systematic. And after 1990, students were sent to Western universities, and the most important of them was Ekrem Sarıkçıoğlu. He is still alive. He went to Germany and then came back. He brought new methods with him. He left the traditional approaches and then accepted international methods. He organized the first symposium in 1992. He wrote a book called Phenomenology of Religion. In this new period, people began to focus on special areas like Hinduism and Buddhism. They began to attend international scholarly activities. They began to teach Hebrew, Latin, and ancient Greek, and they made a lot of translations from Western scholars like Mircea Eliade or Pettazzoni. Now we have new developments. In Ankara, a Turkish Association of the History of Religions was founded, and it joined the International Association of the History of Religions. It was a very important development in Turkey. And then we have the Journal for Research on Culture, Belief and Mythology. It's called Milal and Nihal. It publishes twice a year, and it's very important in the study of history of religions in Turkey right now. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please write it to me, write it in the commentaries, and I will try to answer all of these questions. Have a good day.